Cowgirl road tripping through the United States. It was April 2018, and I had been in the US for 6 months on a tourist visa. I needed to return to Australia to take care of a few things before I returned to Texas to begin college. I was living on a ranch just outside of San Antonio with an old cowgirl, 3 quarter horses, 2 barn cats, and a watchdog named Pearl. The cowgirl and I decided to spend a couple of weeks before my departure road tripping through the US in a massive red truck, a 2017 Ford F-350 monstrosity that I nicknamed the Red Menace. She also owned a 2013 red Cadillac sedan, which was much lighter on fuel consumption, but was determined to drive us up to Canada in the gas guzzler. I couldn't understand the seemingly illogical choice and asked her why. "I just feel more ready for trouble in my truck." "What trouble?" I asked. "In case someone wants to mess with me," she replied, as if it were a given. "The only reason someone would want to mess with you is if you act like a I said. "And you're going to be on your best behavior, aren't you?" I asked, as if she was a child, which effectively she was most of the time. "Yes, ma'am," she said with a smile, "but you never know." I just shook my head and continued packing for the 2-week road trip. We loaded the truck with luggage, snacks, and an MP3 player full of country tunes, stopping first at Buc-ee's, the most famous gas station and convenience store chain in the great state of Texas. While the cowgirl believed the restrooms were the most impressive feature of the franchise, the quantity of gas pumps astounded me the most. Having lived in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, where things are a little more understated, I had never seen rows and rows of pumps on that scale before. Each Buc-ee's also had a convenience store that could rival a small warehouse. Shelves and displays were filled with snacks and beverages containing enough sugar to send your system into an insulin-induced overload, as well as branded merchandise for any home decorating or clothing needs, outdoor furniture, and potentially a do-it-yourself rocket ship. I wandered through the aisles, mesmerized by the sheer volume and range of goodies. Then I hauled myself back into the truck, and on we went. Our first stop was Baton Rouge in Louisiana, for dinner with old friends before heading to the hotel in New Orleans. The following day spent wandering through the French Quarter was a feast for the senses. I soaked in the sights of quaint little bistros as the waft of baked goods permeated my nostrils and my mouth watered. The sounds of soft jazz drifted in the air, caressing my ears, while people laughed and chatted at outdoor cafes. Wandering the streets, I marveled at the architecture and pure joy that emanated from the musicians performing on them. In the evening, we headed down Bourbon Street, famous for its many bars and clubs, the thoroughfare delivering a more pungent experience as remnants of the partygoers from the night before littered the sidewalks. Brushing it off, we continued off the main beat to a lovely little restaurant recommended by a local. Beautiful food was washed down with a glass of white wine as a quartet expertly performed a medley of jazz standards in the corner of the small eatery. Still basking in the afterglow of the centuries-old city the next morning, I was excited to be back in the truck, rolling down Route 45 toward our next destination, Nashville, Tennessee. From the moment the red Ford rolled across the Mississippi-Tennessee state line, I felt it, a connection with the southern state. I have been a country music fan for decades, and visiting Nashville was a bucket list item for me. With thoughts of the Grand Ole Opry, the Ryman Theatre, and the bars on Broadway two-stepping through my head, I stared in wonder at the green hills, pastures, and white farm fences that flew by the windows. It's so beautiful. I never expected it to be so green, I mused, staring longingly at the landscape. Having begun our journey in Texas, I had been anticipating more of the same. The southern US is hot, and although we were traveling in the spring, the Lone Star State was still relatively brown. Tennessee's terrain was obviously different. Easing into Nashville, my little country soul exploded with happiness. I craned my neck as we drove through the streets and up Broadway, taking in the signs and storefronts. Although the main thoroughfare is a little more than a ghost town in the day, I knew we would return the following evening in search of honky-tonks. I woke the next day feeling exhilarated, more than ready to discover as many country music treasures as I could. Staring up at the giant guitars flanking the entryway of the Grand Ole Opry House, I basked in the energy of the country stars that had performed there. It wasn't long before I found Dolly, or her likeness at least, depicted in a mural on the wall to the left of the massive building. My smile was broad as I posed for a picture with one of my idols. Not only is Dolly Parton a national treasure, but she is also one of the loveliest human beings on the planet, and someone I admire immensely. The evening brought a chance to go honky-tonkin', but as we wandered down Broadway, I was disappointed to hear mostly rock and pop bellowing from the establishments. "Where's all the country music?" I asked my friend. "Your guess is as good as mine," she countered, equally unimpressed. Just as we were about to call it a night, pure country music drifted in the air from an understated little dive bar tucked between two larger taverns at the end of the strip. It was here I found what I was looking for. A band headed by a female singer, playing old and new country tunes. We grabbed a drink, and as I sat grooving in my chair to the sounds emanating from the stage, two ladies pulled me onto the dance floor for a song or two. I closed my eyes and moved to the music that had willed its way into my soul decades before. The pain of love lost, the high of love gained, and the twang of everything in between. It all spoke to me. At that moment, I was part of the town I never wanted to leave. Alas, this was not to be. We were leaving in the morning. With the truck loaded up and a coffee in hand, we stopped at the Bluebird Cafe on our way out of Nashville. The Bluebird is the city's most famous venue to showcase new songwriters' talent. It was closed, and I knew the waiting list to catch an evening show was about 4 months long. But I just wanted to see the building, to stand in its presence. I cupped my hands to my eyes and peered into the darkened windows, delighted to see the familiar arrangements of tables made so famous in the TV series Nashville. Our next destination was Toronto, Canada, where I was due to catch the first of my 3 flights back to Perth in Western Australia. We spent a night in a hotel just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, where I made use of the extra hours to swim a few laps in the pool. I had not been able to exercise much on the trip, apart from walking through city streets, and needed to move my body after days in the truck cab. After a night in Erie, Pennsylvania, we headed towards Niagara Falls and the Rainbow International Bridge crossing. I wanted to walk across the bridge into Canada. Walking into another country was a novelty to me, as I had only experienced it once, a few months prior, when a friend and I walked into Mexico to renew my visa. Growing up in South Africa, it would never occur to you to walk into bordering countries, as tensions were far too high, and it was incredibly dangerous. Living for almost 15 years on 2 islands, Australia and New Zealand, trying to walk into another country involved drowning or being eaten by a shark. I jumped out of the truck and walked towards the bridge, taking a last look over my shoulder at the cowgirl who watched until I was safely on the path to the crossing before joining the line of cars waiting to go through the checkpoint. I wandered slowly across the bridge, marveling at the majesty of Niagara Falls and enjoying the signs with the word Canada emblazoned on them, next to an arrow pointing the way, as if one could get lost walking a straight path. At the halfway point, there was a plaque with the names of the two countries and a line separating them, the US to the left, Canada to the right. I kept an eye on the Red Menace as I walked, eventually entering the office with a Canadian passport control officer. She was solemn, as they all are, asking me the standard questions. Why are you visiting Canada? How long are you staying? Where are you staying? With the questions answered, she stamped my passport and pointed me towards the exit door. With that, my US road trip was over. I took a poignant look back into the US, knowing it would only be a matter of time until I could return to the land of the red, white, and blue.